The door was already open when Julie stepped in. David looked up before she said anything. He always did that, like he heard her coming before she made a sound. Her phone had buzzed in the hallway 2 minutes before. She had answered without thinking. The voice on the other end had said something that rearranged everything. Now she was standing in the doorway of her boss's office on her third day of work, and she could not find a single word. Julie. His voice was lower than usual. She realized she had not answered him. I'm sorry, she started. She stopped. Her throat had closed. The tears came before she could stop them, and she could not stop them. He did not look back at the blueprint. He stood up, picked up his chair, moved it around to her side of the desk, and sat down close. He did not say anything. He just waited. Julie sat. The tears came anyway. She let them. Outside, the city moved. Inside that office, nothing did. 3 days earlier, she had not known his name. 3 days earlier. Julie was still checking the address on her phone when a voice came from the stairs. You're early. She turned too fast. A man stood above her on the stairs. Tall, dark-haired, somewhere in his early 40s. He had a rolled blueprint under one arm and a glass of iced tea in his hand. He was watching her. Not rudely, just watching, the way someone does when they notice something they were not expecting. She straightened. Julie Carr, I start today. I know. He came down the last step and extended his hand. David Mercer. His grip was brief and firm. He was already looking at the blueprint again before he let go. Conference room is on the second floor, he said, starting back up. Leave your coat anywhere. Coffee's in the kitchen. Iced tea's in the fridge if you prefer. She preferred iced tea. She had not said so. She filed that away for no reason she could name. She watched him go up the stairs. Then she took 3 steps inside and stopped. The warmth reached her shoulders first, dry and settled, the kind of warmth that meant old walls and good insulation. Her chest loosened slightly. She had not noticed how tight it had been until just then. She thought, that is either very good or very dangerous for her right now. The conference room held a long table covered in files and site photographs. A second man was already seated at the far end, younger, easy smile. Marcus, he said, standing. I manage the site teams. You'll deal with me more than David, probably. A pause. He likes to pretend the admin side runs itself. It ran itself before you got here, David said, without looking up from the blueprint he had just unrolled. It ran itself into the ground, Marcus said cheerfully, and sat back down. Julie looked between them. Something in her shoulders loosened, a tension she had carried in from the street. The Harlow building, David said, looking up. His eyes found hers directly. Gray, steady. They held contact a beat longer than most people do. You reviewed the file? Last night, she said. East facade restoration is behind. Scaffolding permit expired in August. He was quiet. Not the quiet of someone who did not know. The quiet of someone checking whether she did. It did, he said. I flagged 3 other permit issues. Walk you through them now or send them over. Now, he said. Marcus caught her eye from across the table. Small, approving nod. She did not let herself smile. Almost. They worked through the morning. At a certain point, David stepped out to take the owner call. He handled it in 2 sentences. Julie kept her eyes on the files. At some point, a glass of iced tea appeared by her elbow. No comment, no ceremony. Nobody had asked whether she wanted it. She told herself it was just the first day effect. Everything felt heightened on the first day. She closed the file, opened it again. Still read nothing. That afternoon, David passed her open door twice. The second time he slowed, almost imperceptibly. She did not look up. He did not stop. Marcus appeared in her doorway at 4. First day survived, he said. Too early to say, she said. That means you're paying attention. He glanced down the hall toward David's office, then back at her. Does he always move that quietly? Marcus smiled. Only when something matters. He disappeared before she could decide what that meant. By evening, she wasn't thinking about the Harlow permits at all. The second day, she arrived early, not early enough. David was already at the conference room window when she came in, looking out at the street with his coffee in his hand. He turned when he heard her. "You're early again," he said. "Habit," she said. He looked at her for a moment, then back at the street. "The Harlow file is on the table." She sat down and opened it. He stayed at the window another minute before joining her, and she kept her eyes on the pages and told herself she had not been counting the seconds. "The Harlow scaffolding permit," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "You said 3 other issues. I only counted 2 in your notes." "The third one is not a permit issue," she said. "It is a structural notation filed under the wrong category. Looks like an admin error, but it changes the restoration scope." He looked at her. "Show me," he said. She turned the file toward him and pointed to the notation. He leaned forward to read it. For a moment, they were both over the same page, close enough that she caught something clean and faint. Cedar, maybe, or just him. She focused on the document, made herself focus. The words blurred slightly before she pulled them back into clarity. "You are right," he said. He sat back. "That changes the East Wall timeline by at least 3 weeks. I know. The owner is not going to like that." "No," she agreed. "But he likes structural failure less." David looked at her again with that same measuring quality. Then his expression changed. Brief, almost imperceptible. Not quite a smile, something that preceded one. "I'll make the call," he said, and pulled the file toward him. She walked back to her office, telling herself that the warmth in her chest was professional satisfaction. She was good at this job. She had found the error, that was all. Marcus appeared in her doorway 20 minutes later with a container of leftover sushi from the place down the street and set it on her desk without ceremony. "Peace offering," he said. "David makes the difficult calls himself. That means you did something right. He usually lets the rest of us deliver bad news." She looked at the sushi. "You brought me food." "I brought myself food and there was extra." He shrugged. "You look like you skipped lunch?" She had skipped lunch. They ate at her desk, and Marcus talked with the ease of someone who had been in this firm long enough to have opinions about everything. "He turned down a commercial contract 2 years ago," Marcus said, gesturing with a chopstick. "Developer wanted to strip a 19th century facade. David said no in about 4 words. "What 4 words?" Julie asked. "I don't recall exactly." Marcus smiled. The general meaning was no. "He is particular about the work," Marcus said. "I noticed," Julie said. "He is particular about everything." Marcus set his chopsticks down. He looked at the space between them for a moment, the way people do when they are deciding how much of a story to tell. It wasn't always just him, you know. There was a partner. Years ago, Richard Voss. Smart guy, different vision. When he left, David he shrugged. Closed the door on that chapter. Never replaced him. Julie looked at the empty chair at the end of the desk, the one that faced David's office down the hall. "What happened?" she asked. "They wanted different things," Marcus said simply. David wanted to keep the work honest. Richard wanted to scale. He picked up his chopsticks again. Anyway, ancient history. She thought about the iced tea that had appeared by her elbow that morning. She thought about the way David had said, "Show me," instead of "explain it." "I noticed that too," she said. That evening, she called her sister. Her sister asked how the new job was. Julie said it was good. Her sister asked if she had met anyone interesting. Julie said no and looked out the window of her apartment at the street below and told herself it was the truth. The third day started with the Calloway file and a disagreement. Not a loud one. The opposite. The kind of disagreement that happened at normal volume between 2 people who were each very sure they were right. David wanted to prioritize the interior stonework on the Calloway project, which was an 18th century chapel they were restoring for a private foundation. Julie had reviewed the file the night before and had a different view. "The roof drainage issue has to come first," she said. They were standing on either side of the conference table, files open between them. "If water gets into the east wall before the interior stonework is sealed, we lose 3 weeks of completed work." "The interior timeline is committed," David said. "The foundation has a board presentation in November." The foundation will not care about the timeline if the wall is damaged. He looked at her steadily. She met it. You have been here 3 days, he said, not unkind, factual. The file has been here longer, she said. The drainage report is dated June. Someone flagged it, and then the note got buried under the stonework schedule. A beat of silence. Show me the drainage report, he said. She had it ready. She turned the pages toward him. He read it with that same focused stillness he brought to everything, and she watched his jaw shift slightly as he reached the flagged section. All right, he said. Just that. All right. He did not explain or qualify. He pulled out his phone and rescheduled the foundation call. Marcus appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who had heard raised voices and was disappointed to find none. Everything fine? The drainage timeline moves first, David said without looking up. Adjust the crew schedule. Sure, Marcus said, looking at Julie with something between respect and amusement. She felt a quiet satisfaction that she did not let show on her face. But she thought David saw it anyway, because as he gathered his files, he paused for just a second with his eyes on her. And that thing that was almost a smile crossed his expression again and was gone. The rest of the morning moved between the Ellison file and a drainage conversation that somehow became personal without either of them naming it. The notation system in this file is inconsistent, she said at a certain point. Marcus reorganized it last year, David said without looking up. He reorganized it wrong. A pause. I know, David said. Tell him that, not me. She looked up. He was almost smiling. You already told him, she said. 3 times, he said, and turned a page. Somewhere in the middle of that exchange, a fresh glass of iced tea appeared near her side of the table. She wrapped her hands around it and kept her eyes on the file and said nothing about it. At 2 in the afternoon, she excused herself to take a call she had been expecting, a routine follow-up from her previous employer about a reference. She stepped into the hallway, answered, and then stood very still as the conversation shifted. It was not the reference call. It was her former colleague Diane calling from her personal number to tell Julie something she had found out that morning. Something about the man Julie had almost married. Something that clarified, in the worst possible way, a question that had been living in the back of Julie's chest for 4 months. She stood in the hallway and listened and said almost nothing. When the call ended, she stood there a moment longer, the phone still in her hand, and breathed. Then she walked to David's office because she had been walking there before the call came in, and she could not think of anywhere else to go, and the door was open. He looked up. He always looked up before she arrived. You needed to talk about the Harlow file, he said. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Julie, she tried again. Her throat had other plans. The tears she had been holding since the hallway arrived without asking permission, and she could not stop them. David stood up. He picked up his chair. He moved it around to her side of the desk and sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, leaving the other seat open. He did not ask what happened. He did not hand her anything. He simply sat there, steady and present, and waited. She cried for about 4 minutes. Then she stopped, because she was the kind of person who stopped, and she wiped her face with the back of her hand and stared at the corner of his desk. I'm sorry, she said. Don't, he said quietly. She looked at him. He was watching her with something careful and direct in his expression, not pity, not discomfort. Something that looked, she thought, like recognition. Bad call, she said. I gathered. It was personal, not work. I know. He paused. Do you want tea? She almost laughed. It was the last thing she had expected him to say. The laugh did not quite make it out, but something like it moved across her face, and she saw him register it, and something in his posture shifted, very slightly, like a held breath releasing. Yes, she said. Actually, yes. He stood, and as he moved toward the small kitchen down the hall, she sat in the chair he had pulled around for her and let the office settle quietly around her shoulders. She did not know yet what she had walked into. That afternoon, in that open door, she only knew that the chair was still warm from where he had been sitting. Before we continue, I create the stories here at Love and Light Stories, and I would love to have you stay. If something about the way David moved that chair already got to you, please subscribe and leave a like. It would mean everything to me. Now let us go back to Julie. The fourth day, she arrived to find a site visit on the schedule. The Callaway Chapel was 40 minutes outside the city, set back from a two-lane road behind a low stone wall. The morning was clear and cool, the kind of light that made old stone look like it was lit from inside. David drove. She sat in the passenger seat with the site file open on her lap, and they talked about the drainage plan, and the conversation was completely professional, except for the fact that at a certain point he said something dry about the June report being buried for 3 months, and she said something dry back about people who file drainage concerns under miscellaneous. And they both went quiet at the same moment, aware that they were close to finding the same thing funny, and neither of them completed the laugh. The chapel was beautiful. That was the first thing she felt when she got out of the car, the unexpected beauty of it, the way it sat in the landscape as if it had always been there and was not in a hurry to go anywhere. The stone was dark gray and gold in the morning light, the facade marked by decades of weather that had given it texture instead of damage. It was built in 1742, David said, coming to stand beside her. He was looking at it the way she imagined he looked at all his buildings, not just professionally, like it mattered to him personally. It looks like it knows it, she said. He glanced at her. That almost smile. They spent 2 hours on site. The drainage issue was exactly as the report had described, a blocked channel along the east side directing water toward the foundation. The site foreman walked them through the existing plan, and David asked 3 questions that reordered the entire approach, and Julie added 2 observations that he incorporated without ceremony, just turned them into decisions and moved on. At one point, they were both crouched over the same section of the drainage channel, the foreman on the other side, and David leaned across to point at something in the stonework. His shoulder was an inch from hers, maybe less. She was very aware of that inch. He did not seem to notice, or if he did not move away. She straightened before he did. She told herself it was because her knees were cold. She liked that about him, the absence of ego in the work. She was less certain about what to do with the rest of it. At noon, the foreman went to deal with the delivery issue, and David and Julie stood on the chapel steps eating the sandwiches the site team had provided, because they had both forgotten to bring lunch. Hers had mustard, which she did not love. She picked it off. "You don't like mustard," he said. "I don't." "There's a place in the village that does good sushi, if you'd rather." She looked at him. He was looking at the chapel, expression neutral, as if he had said something unremarkable. "Sushi is better than mustard," she said. He nodded once, like that settled something, and took a bite of his sandwich. They did not go to the sushi place. They finished the site visit and drove back in the afternoon light, talking about the revised timeline. But something had shifted, and they both knew it, even if neither of them said so. That evening, working late on the Callaway revision, she heard him in the kitchen. She heard the refrigerator open. Then he appeared in her doorway with a glass of iced tea, set it on her desk, and was already gone again before she could say anything. She sat with the cold glass in both hands and stared at the Callaway file and told herself firmly and clearly that she was not going to do anything foolish. She set the glass down, picked up her pen, put it down again. The 5th day brought Richard. She knew who he was before Marcus introduced them. She had seen the name in the older files, the ones from 4 years ago, before the firm structure had changed. Richard Voss, former partner. He had the kind of presence that entered a room a half second before he did, a careful arrangement of confidence and ease that suggested long practice. "You must be the new coordinator," he said, and shook her hand with both of his in a way that felt warmer than a first meeting warranted. "Julie Carr," she said. "Richard Voss. I used to work with David, back when this place was a little less impressive and a little more chaotic." He smiled. He had a good smile. She noted it with the same professional attention she gave everything and did not file it anywhere important. David appeared from the conference room. The air in the hallway changed when he and Richard faced each other. Not hostility, something more controlled. 2 people with unresolved history who had agreed, wordlessly, not to let it show. "Richard," David said. David, the Callaway project looks good. I was reading the revised drainage plan. Julie caught the June report. Richard turned to her with an expression of genuine interest that was also, she sensed, information delivered to David. Thorough, he said. The file was thorough, she said. I just read it. David made a short sound that was not quite a laugh, and she was unreasonably pleased by it. The meeting lasted an hour. Richard had proposals for the firm, expansion possibilities, investor interest. He presented them with the easy fluency of someone who had thought about this for a long time. David listened with the stillness she had come to recognize as his most careful attention. It is a different kind of firm than the one I built, David said when Richard had finished. It is a larger one, Richard said, with more resources. Same quality, more reach. We will talk, David said, which was not yes, but was not no. And Richard seemed to know the difference. After Richard left, David stood at the window of the conference room for a minute longer than usual. Julie was gathering her files from the table. She did not look at him directly. He seems persuasive, she said, because the silence was doing something she did not trust. He is, David said. He paused. He is also usually right about the practical side of things. But, she said. He looked at her. But, he did not finish the sentence. She did not ask him to. That evening, Marcus found her in the kitchen and leaned against the counter with the expression he wore when he was going to tell her something important in a casual tone. Richard and David were partners for 6 years, he said. Richard wanted to take the firm commercial. David didn't. Richard left. Clean exit, no drama. He paused. Mostly. She poured the last of the iced tea into a glass. Why are you telling me this? Marcus considered the question. Because Richard came back today for the first time in 3 years, and he was very interested in meeting you. She held his gaze. That doesn't have anything to do with me. Probably not, Marcus said easily and went back to his desk. She stood in the kitchen a moment longer, the cool glass in her hand, and thought about the way David had stood at the window after Richard left, and the sentence he had not finished. The 6th day, David brought lunch. Not for the office. For her specifically, which she discovered when she found a container of sushi on her desk with a sticky note that said, Callaway revision, 2nd round, in his handwriting. No explanation, no ceremony. She sat down and opened it and ate while she worked and tried not to think too much about what it meant that he had remembered. The Callaway revision was dense and satisfying. She worked through the afternoon with the particular focus that came when a problem had a clear solution and enough complexity to make finding it interesting. At 4 o'clock, she brought the revised plan to the conference room, where David was on a call. He saw her in the doorway and held up one finger. She waited. He wrapped up the call in under 2 minutes, which she had started to understand was his standard, and turned to her. She walked him through the revision. He asked 2 questions. She had the answers. He nodded slowly, and there was something in the quality of his attention, the way he was looking at the plan and then at her, that made the room feel warmer than it probably was. This is good work, he said. Thank you. A pause. You found something in every file this week, he said. It was not quite a question. The files are good, she said. Someone did careful work on them. Marcus, mostly. His voice was even. And me. I know, she said. He looked at her. The afternoon light came through the window and landed on the side of his face, and she was aware, in a way she had been trying not to be, of exactly how close they were standing over the same document. You've settled in quickly, he said. I needed to. The words came out before she weighed them. She did not qualify them. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved in his expression, something she could not quite name. And then he stepped back, just slightly, a conscious and deliberate motion, and looked back at the plan. Send me the final version by end of day, he said. Already done, she said. She walked back to her office and sat down and pressed both hands flat on the desk and breathed. At 5:30, Richard appeared in the doorway of her office. She had not heard him come back in. I was hoping to catch David, he said pleasantly. Is he still here? I think so, she said. He did not leave. He leaned in the doorway with the ease of someone who had been in this building many times and felt entitled to its space. How are you finding it? He asked. The firm? Very good, she said. The work is interesting. David is exacting, Richard said. He always has been. High standards for the work, high standards for the people. A pause. He doesn't let many people close. She kept her expression neutral. He has been a good boss. Richard smiled. Of course, that's what he's good at. He straightened. Tell him I stopped by. He left. She sat very still for a moment. Then she saved the Callaway file, shut her computer down, and drove home in the early dark, and did not let herself think about the doorway or the smile or what Richard had meant to suggest. She kept the radio loud the whole way home. The seventh day started with a message from David that said, "Site visit, 8 sharp, no other details." She was waiting outside when he pulled up. He looked at her through the windshield for a moment before unlocking the door, and she had the distinct impression he had not expected her to be on time, or perhaps had not expected her to be quite so visibly fine about being summoned before 8 in the morning. Good morning, she said, getting in. Morning? He pulled out of the lot. The Ellison building. There is a section of the north facade that the contractor flagged yesterday. I want to see it before we decide whether to revise the timeline. I reviewed the Ellison file last night, she said. He glanced at her. I know. I thought you might want the comparison notes on the original stonework report. She handed him the printed pages. He took them without looking away from the road, set them on his knee, and glanced down once at the top page in a way that somehow communicated he had already absorbed the relevant information. The Ellison building was a mid-19th century commercial block in the warehouse district, 3 stories of pale brick with cast iron detailing that had been layered over and obscured during a 1960s renovation. Stripping it back was painstaking work. The north facade section the contractor had flagged was a 12-foot stretch where the later brickwork had separated from the original, leaving a gap that would worsen over winter. They stood in front of it together in the morning cold. David had his hands in his coat pockets. She had hers wrapped around the site folder. The original mortar is intact underneath, she said. Yes. So the question is whether you remove the entire overlay or just stabilize the separated section. Yes. She looked at the facade, then at him. You already know what you want to do. I want to know what you think, he said. She looked back at the building. Remove it. The overlay is masking structural information. Every time you patch around it instead of removing it, you are deferring a decision that will cost more later. A silence. That applies to more than facades, he said. His voice was quiet, and she was not certain he had meant to say it out loud. She did not answer. The cold morning air sat between them, and the building stood there full of its own patient history, and she was very aware of the few inches between his shoulder and hers. We'll remove it, he said, and turned back toward the car. On the drive back, she told herself that one sentence said half by accident did not mean anything. People said things. Words came out. She turned up the heating in the car. Her hands were cold. At the office, Richard was already there. He was in the conference room with Marcus, reviewing something on the table, and when Julie walked in behind David, the way he looked up at her was warm and attentive and slightly too deliberate. Good timing, Richard said. I wanted to go over the Harlow projections with both of you. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Richard was thorough and well prepared and made the expansion proposal sound not just practical, but inevitable. He directed several of his points at Julie in a way that felt like recruitment, and she answered clearly and did not take the invitation. David said little. He sat at the head of the table with his pen in his hand and his eyes moving between the documents and Richard's face, and he had the stillness of someone who was doing much more thinking than talking. After the meeting, Richard walked out with Julie toward the kitchen, while David stayed behind to take a call. He trusts your judgment, Richard said, getting himself a glass of water. That doesn't happen quickly with David. He trusts careful work, she said. Of course. Richard leaned against the counter. I just wonder if you know what you've walked into. She looked at him directly. I'm not sure what you mean. Richard met her gaze with something that looked, she thought, uncomfortably close to kindness. He had a partner once, Richard said. A business partner, before me. They worked together for years. She was good. He trusted her completely. When things shifted between them, when it became more than professional, he pulled back. Completely. She left 6 months later. He paused. Then I came in, same pattern, different context. He gets close to a point and then he closes. It's not cruelty. It's just what he does. Julie said nothing. I'm telling you because you seem like someone who deserves to know the shape of things, Richard said. Not to discourage you, just so you are not surprised. He refilled his glass and left. She stood in the kitchen with her hands very still at her sides. Outside, she could hear David's voice, low and even, wrapping up the call. In a few minutes, he would come find her about the Ellison decision. He would stand across the desk from her, and the afternoon light would do what it had been doing all week, and she was going to have to decide what to do with the information she had just been given. She looked at the glass of iced tea she had poured for herself. It was starting to sweat in the warm kitchen air. She thought about the chair he had moved around the desk on her third day. She thought about the facade of the Ellison building and what he had said about deferring decisions that would cost more later. She thought, it is possible that he meant the building. She thought, it is also possible that he did not. She picked up her tea and walked back to her office and sat down and opened the Ellison file, and told herself she needed more time to think about this. She did not feel like she had more time. The glass from the night before was still on her desk when she arrived. She had forgotten to take it to the kitchen. It sat there in the morning light, a ring of condensation dried into the wood, and she looked at it for a moment before she put it away. She had not slept well. She knew what she felt. She had known for days. What Richard had told her had not changed the feeling, only laid something cold over something warm, and she was not sure yet what to do with that. David was already in the conference room. He looked up when she came in and then looked at her a beat longer than usual. Sit down, he said. She sat. He pushed a file across the table. Harlow permit came through this morning. We are cleared to start the east facade. She looked at the permit. That was faster than expected. I made some calls. He sat back. He was watching her still, with that careful gray attention. You look like you didn't sleep. I slept fine, she said. All right, he said, in a tone that meant he did not entirely believe her, but was not going to press. They worked through the morning. The Harlow clearance meant a schedule shift for 3 other projects, and they spent 2 hours reorganizing the timeline. And it was the kind of work she was good at, the kind that demanded enough focus to quiet everything else. She was grateful for it. At noon, Marcus brought in sushi from the place on the corner, 3 orders, and set them on the conference table with the cheerful efficiency of someone who had decided unilaterally that this was what the afternoon required. Team lunch, he announced. I'm not taking requests. They ate around the conference table, files pushed aside. Marcus talked about the site team and a particularly difficult stretch of 19th century ironwork, and David listened with the focused amusement he reserved for Marcus's stories, and Julie ate her salmon rolls and watched the 2 of them and felt something that was complicated and warm and painful all at once. She wanted this. That was the problem, not just the work. This room, these people, this ordinary afternoon with the light coming in and the chopsticks and the easy way David reached across the table to look at something Marcus had pointed out without making it a performance. After Marcus left, David stayed at the table. So did she, because her file was still open. Richard spoke to you, David said. She looked up. He was looking at his own file. Yes, she said. A pause. He is good at that, David said. His voice was even. Finding the thing that makes people uncertain. She kept her eyes on him. Is what he said true? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his file, which she hadn't seen him do in the middle of a workday before. Parts of it, he said. He met her gaze. Not all of it. She waited. The part about closing, he said. That part is true. A pause. His jaw was set in a way she recognized. the way it looked when he was making a decision he had been avoiding. The part about it being fixed, that part I am less sure about. She held that. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay. That is not nothing, she said. What you just said. No, he said quietly. It is not. The afternoon light stretched across the table between them. Neither of them moved, but the air had changed, the way it had on the Calloway steps and the Ellison facade and every careful, accumulating moment of this week, and this time, neither of them looked away. The ninth day started well and broke badly. In the morning, they were at the Ellison building, watching the crew begin removing the overlay brickwork from the north facade. It was slow, careful work. David stood with his hands in his coat pockets, watching with the full attention he gave everything he cared about. The contractor asked a question about the original mortar. David turned to Julie before answering, a small and automatic gesture, the way you turn to someone you have already learned to trust. She answered before he did. The contractor nodded and moved on. David looked at her for a moment. You studied the original survey, he said. Last night? She said. You don't have to do that. I know, she said. I wanted to. They looked at each other a beat longer than the question required. The morning air was cold. The scaffolding was going up. She was acutely, uncomfortably aware of how much she did not want to lose any of this. They drove back in the good silence, the kind that had been building all week. The bad part started at 2, with Richard. He arrived with a revised proposal and a developer named Hargreave, a man with a firm handshake and the easy confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he came for. Richard spread the documents on the conference table and walked through them with smooth efficiency. And Julie understood within 5 minutes that the numbers were not the point. The point was her. Richard kept directing questions her way, pulling her into the presentation, making her presence in the room part of the argument. He was showing David what the firm could look like if it grew, and Julie became central to it. He was offering a future that included her, banking on the idea that David would not want to be the reason it did not happen. Her jaw was tight the entire meeting. The coordinator role would expand significantly, Richard said, looking at her. More resources, a real team under you. I like working the way we work, she said. Richard smiled. You have been here 9 days. The room went still. She kept her eyes on Richard. That is true. And in 9 days, I found 4 issues that had been sitting in the files for months. I know what kind of work gets done here. I know why. Richard looked at David. She is good. I know, David said. Flat. Final. The meeting ended shortly after. Hargreave left with the composure of someone who had expected this. Richard left with the composure of someone who had not given up. Marcus disappeared. David stood at the window. Julie gathered her notes. The room felt charged in a way she did not trust herself to navigate carefully, so she did not try. He used you, David said without turning. I noticed. I'm sorry. It is not your fault, she said. She paused. Is it? He turned. What does that mean? It means I need to know something. Her chest was tight. She had been careful all week, and she was tired of it. Richard says you close when things get close. I have been watching you for 9 days, and I do not know if that is true or if he is using a true thing to do something false with it. David was very still. And I need to know, she said, because I am not good at pretending I do not feel what I feel. I have been trying to do it for 9 days, and I cannot keep doing it. He stepped toward her, stopped. Julie. That is not an answer. He was close now. Close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the deliberate way he was holding himself in place. I know what I want to say, he said slowly. I am not sure I know how to say it without making a promise I break. Her throat tightened. Then maybe he was right. That is not. He stopped. His hand came up, dropped. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? The silence stretched between them. The afternoon light was flat and honest on the table. Outside, a car passed. Inside, nothing moved. He looked at her the way he looked at the Ellison facade, like something that mattered too much to rush and too much to leave. If I do this, he said very quietly, I am not doing it halfway. Her breath caught. He took one step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him the way she had on the third day in his office, except this time there was no file between them and no pretense of one. His eyes were on hers, his hand lifted toward her face, and then his phone rang. He did not move for one full second, neither did she. The phone rang again. He closed his eyes briefly, stepped back, pulled it from his pocket and looked at the screen, and something tightened in his expression. I have to take this, he said. His voice was low and rough in a way she had not heard before. Take it, she said. He walked out. She heard his voice in the hallway, professional and even, and she stood very still in the conference room, with her files in her hands and her pulse loud in her chest. She gathered her things. She walked to her office. She sat down and pressed both palms flat on the desk and stared at the Harlow file without reading a word of it. 20 minutes later, she heard him come back down the hall. He stopped in her doorway. It was the Calloway Foundation, he said. The review has been moved up. Next week. All right, she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. Everything that had almost happened was still in the room, still between them, unchanged. Julie, he said. Not now, she said. He took a step toward her. Not like this, she said. I need to know you are choosing me, David, not just finishing what got interrupted. His face changed. Not hurt. Something more careful than that. That is not what this is, he said quietly. Then prove it tomorrow. He stood there one more second. Then he nodded and walked out. She sat alone in the office for a long time after that. The iced tea on her desk had gone warm. The city outside had gone dark. She did not regret saying it. That was the worst part. She knew she had done the right thing, and it hurt just as much as if she had not. She did not sleep well. She was at her desk by 8, earlier than usual, because the apartment had felt small and the work felt large and she needed somewhere to put her hands. David was already in. She could hear him in the conference room, on a call, his voice low and even. She opened the Harlow file and did not read a word of it for 10 minutes. At 8:40, he appeared in her doorway. He looked at her, then came in and set a glass of iced tea on her desk without saying anything about the night before. She wrapped her hands around the cold glass. Good morning, she said. Good morning. He sat in the chair across from her. Not the professional distance. The chair of someone who had decided to be in the room. I thought about what you said, he said. She waited. You were right to leave, he said. I was not ready to say what I should have said. Are you ready now? He met her eyes directly. I want to try. That is what I know how to say right now. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise. It was a man being as honest as he knew how to be. And she understood the weight of it in a way she could not have on day one but could now, after 9 days of watching him. Okay, she said. Okay, he said quietly. They were still looking at each other when Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Richard is here, Marcus said. With someone. The someone was Hargreave again, with a revised offer and the easy fluency of someone who had not yet learned to read the room. Richard spread the new documents on the conference table with the efficiency of a final move. David read the first page in silence. Then he set it down. You brought a developer into my office without an invitation, he said. I brought an opportunity, Richard said. You brought pressure. David's voice was even and very quiet, which she had learned was more serious than raised. That is different. Hargreave leaned forward and turned to Julie. With the right team structure, your role here could become something significant. Your instincts seem sound for someone still learning the firm's standards. The room went quiet. David set his pen down. Julie has been here 9 days, he said. In that time, she identified a misfiled structural notation that saved 3 weeks on the Calloway project, caught a permit gap that would have halted the Harlow east facade, and revised the Ellison drainage approach before the crew reached the north wall. He paused. She is not still learning this firm's standards. She is already setting them. Julie felt the warmth of it hit her chest before she could prepare for it. Hargreave looked at David. Richard looked at David. David was looking at Julie. and his expression was open in a way she had not seen before. Not composure cracked. Composure set aside on purpose. The meeting ended shortly after. Hargreave left cordially. Richard gathered his documents. At the door, Richard paused. His last move on a board, he had already decided to leave. "He will not change," Richard said, looking at Julie. "He never has." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not here to change him." Richard looked between the two of them. Something settled in his expression. Recognition, clean and final. "No," he said quietly. "I can see that." He left. Marcus was already gone. David turned from the window. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her and looked at her the way he had at the Ellison facade, measuring something. But this time there was nothing left to measure. His hand came up slowly. He stopped before touching her face. "May I?" he said. "Yes," she said. His hand was warm at her jaw, and he kissed her properly, slow and deliberate and chosen. Eyes closed, his other hand finding her waist, and she leaned into it and let herself be exactly where she was. When he stepped back, he was still close, his forehead almost against hers. "I have been trying not to do that since the first day," he said low. "The iced tea gave you away," she said. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. His hand was still at her face. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Tonight?" "Tonight?" She looked at him. The afternoon light was steady in the windows, and his eyes were on her, and she thought, this is what it looks like when someone stops waiting. "Yes," she said. He smiled. The real one, full and unhurried. The one she had been waiting 9 days to see. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside this room, for the first time all week, something had stopped holding its breath. Dinner was at the sushi place near the Callaway site. Her suggestion. He had raised an eyebrow, and she had said it seemed like the right place to finally go. And the smile he gave her then was different from every almost smile she had been cataloging all week. Fully real and slightly undone. They sat at a corner table and ordered too much and talked for 3 hours. Not about work, mostly. About the things that had been sitting at the edges of the work all week. She told him about the engagement, the 4 years, the call from Diane that had rearranged everything. She did not dress it up. He listened with the complete stillness he brought to things that mattered. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you walked through that door," he said. "The open one," she said. "The third day. Before that?" He looked at her across the table. "The first day. I'm glad you came in." She thought about sitting in the parking lot, checking the address twice. The hand-lettered sign, the photographs on the wall. "I almost took a different job," she said. "I know," he said. "I saw the other applications. Yours was the one that read like someone actually looking at the files, not performing competence." She considered that. "That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." "I am working on my delivery," he said. "Please don't," she said. "I like your delivery." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, and left it there for the rest of the meal. Walking back to the car, the night air cool around them, he stopped at the corner and turned to face her. "I want to tell you something," he said. She waited. What Richard said, the pattern he described, he was not wrong about the past. He paused. "But when I moved that chair, I knew what I was doing. I did not do it by accident." Her chest tightened. "I had been looking for a reason to stay on my side of that desk all week," he said. "And when you were standing in that doorway, I stopped looking." She was quiet for a moment. "When you moved the chair?" she said. "Were you scared?" He looked at her. The city lights were behind him, and his face was open in the dark. "Yes," he said. "You didn't look scared." "That is usually when I am worst." A pause. "I have been scared most of this week, Julie. I just kept moving anyway." Her throat tightened. "That is good delivery," she said softly. He laughed, low and warm, and kissed her again on the corner of the street, and she let herself lean into it completely. 4 months later, the Mercer Restoration office on a Tuesday morning looked the way it always looked. Blueprints on the conference table. Marcus already on his second tee. The photographs of restored buildings lining the walls. before and afters. Things returned to what they were supposed to be. Julie was at her desk reviewing the Alderton file when David appeared in her doorway with his coat on and a folder in his hand. "Site visit," he said. "You didn't put it on the calendar," she said. "I know." He looked at her steadily. "It is not that kind of site visit." She closed the file and got her coat. The drive was 40 minutes, out past the Callaway Road and further, into a stretch of countryside she did not recognize. He said nothing the whole way, which would have unsettled her 3 months ago but did not anymore. She had learned his silences. This one was the kind that meant he was choosing his words. He pulled off the main road onto a gravel lane and stopped in front of a building she had not seen before. It was a farmhouse. Old stone, wide windows, a low wall around the front, the kind of building that had been standing long enough to have earned its place in the landscape. It was also, clearly, empty. A small sign near the gate said available for restoration. She looked at it for a long moment. David. "I have been looking at it for 2 months," he said. He was watching her, not the building. "I keep coming back." She turned to him. "It needs everything," he said. "Roof, windows, drainage, the lot." A pause. "It also has a kitchen that faces east and a study big enough for 2 desks. Her heart was loud. "2 desks," she said. "One for each of us." He was very still. "If you want that." She looked back at the house, at the stone walls and the east-facing windows, and the low wall around the front that someone had built a long time ago to last. "You are asking me to move in with you," she said. "Move in with me," he said. Then his voice shifted, quieter. "No, that's not all of it." He looked at the house, then back at her. "Build it with me. That is what I should have said 4 months ago when I could not find the words. That is what I meant when I moved the chair." She felt the warmth of it move through her, all the way down. She turned to face him fully. "I want that," she said. He let out a breath that told her he had been holding it longer than this morning. "Good," he said. "David." "What?" "You could have just asked me to move in." "I wanted to show you the house first," he said, "so you could decide if you liked it." She laughed, a real one, and he watched her laugh with the open expression she had been learning for months, the one underneath the composure, the one that was entirely his. She took his hand, and they stood in front of the old stone house in the October morning, the gravel quiet under their feet, the east windows catching the light. "When do we start?" she said. David looked at the house, then back at her. "Today?" he said. She smiled. "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is." He lifted her hand and kissed her fingers, slow and deliberate. "But I want the work. I want the mornings, the bad plumbing, the arguments about paint, the 2 desks, the iced tea in the kitchen. I want all of it, Julie." Her throat tightened. "Then yes," she said softly, "all of it." He pulled her close and kissed her in front of the old stone house, slow and certain, while the October light filled the empty windows of the home they were about to make theirs. This story is now yours. If it stayed with you, tell me how much you enjoyed it. And if you would like more stories like this one, please subscribe. It is free and it keeps this channel alive. I am grateful you were here. See you next time.